Welcome back to the Learning Hub series on APA 7th edition style. In this video, we will discuss requirements for in-text citations. We hope that by the end of the series, you'll have a strong grasp of APA style and will be able to successfully employ it in your writing for your classes. The first aspect of in-text citation in APA style to explain is what it's for. In-text citations are used to indicate where you're using information from your sources in your writing. Usually it's to provide evidence for support of your points. This evidence can take the shape of direct quotations, which are word for word the same as how the source writes it, or a paraphrase or summary. Both paraphrases and summaries take language from your sources and change them into your own words. The primary difference between the two is how much content you're incorporating. A summary takes large amounts of content from a source and boils it down into a much smaller explanation, while a paraphrase takes a small amount of content from a source and rewrites it without substantially changing the length. The important thing to keep in mind with all three of these options for incorporating source materials is that you must always provide in-text citation for any and all of them. If it comes from somewhere outside of your own brain, and even if it comes from your brain but needs corroboration because it isn't what we call quote-unquote common knowledge, then you must cite it. So, given this breakdown of when in-text citations should be incorporated into your writing, we can now talk through some of the requirements for using in-text citations. First, in-text citations are also sometimes called parenthetical citations. That just means that they use parentheses to incorporate the information into your writing as opposed to, say, footnotes. Second, when we talk about in-text citations, that means they are notations that correlate to the end references list to indicate which information in the project comes from which source. As mentioned before, these are required anytime information from a source is used, no matter if it's a direct quote or a paraphrase or summary. The basic structure lists the first part of the full citation from the references, which is usually an indication of authorship, and if there isn't an author, then the title. Then the date of publication, which is most usually the year, but can be N period D period if there isn't a year listed for the source. And finally, the location of that cited information in the source, which is often a page number but can also be paragraph numbers or timestamps. You can see here in the first example in the box, the parenthetical citation comes after the end quotation marks and before the period at the end of the sentence. Commas separate the three parts. Zainalov is the author, 2012 is the date, and P period 22 is the location. Of these parts that go into an in-text citation, the page number is only required when directly quoting. If you are paraphrasing, you are recommended to include it, but it is not required. In that case, you only need to list the author and date information for that source. In the Learning Hub, however, we recommend listing page numbers whenever possible, as it helps your readers track down your source information more easily, and we think that's an easy kindness. When citing information in text, you have two options for how to present it. You can either place all the parts in the parentheses at the end of your sentence, as in the first example in the green box, or you can pull the author and date into the first part of the sentence as context or an introduction to the material you're citing. You can see in the second and third examples here how that can work. If a paraphrase, where you aren't providing location information, you can just have the author and date, which always goes in parentheses, whereas if you're quoting, you would then also need to include the page number on its own at the end of the sentence in parentheses before the period. Let's look at some examples of citations to figure out how we would cite them in text. For each, we've provided both of the methods for in-text citations, pulling the author and date into the sentence as context and placing everything at the end in parentheses. In the first example, we have a YouTube video on the Al Jazeera English channel. For this type of citation, you treat the channel name as the quote-unquote author and list the year when the video was posted to that channel. So we would have, quote, according to the video by Al Jazeera English, parentheses, 2020, close parentheses, comma, continuing the sentence, or we would have parentheses, Al Jazeera English, comma, 2020, close parentheses, period. In the second example, we have a source with one author. These are easy. We would have according to Dujarric, parentheses 2020, close parentheses, comma, continuing the sentence, or we would have parentheses Dujarric, comma, 2020, close parentheses, period. In the third example, we have a source with two authors, which is possibly the trickiest one just because you have to format it differently depending on if you're citing within your sentence or at the end in parentheses. We would have, according to Abilov and Hagiev, parentheses 2019, close parentheses, comma, continuing on, or we would have parentheses Abilov ampersand Hagiev, comma, 2019, close parentheses, period. We'll explain the difference between these in a moment. In the last example, we have a source with multiple authors. When you have 3 or more authors on a source, you're allowed to use the et al. Construction. This is Latin and basically means "and everybody else." So you use it after the first author's name as a kind of shorthand to abbreviate the list. For this, we would have, quote, according to Anderson et al., parentheses, 2013, close parentheses, comma, continuing on. Or we would have parentheses, Anderson et al., comma, 2013, close parentheses, period. Let's talk a bit more in detail about the differences between these depending on the number of authors listed on a source. Try to remember the following formula for how to incorporate author names for a source in your writing in APA 7th citation style. When you have one author, you list their name every time, no matter what. When you have two authors, you list their names every time. How you format those two names depends on whether you're listing them as part of your sentence or at the end in parentheses. If you're naming the authors at the beginning of your sentence, you use the word "and" to separate them. If you place the author names at the end in the parentheses, you use the symbol ampersand. You can see the example from the previous slide repeated in the example box here. To remember which way to do it, tell yourself if you place the word with the words and the symbol with the symbols, and hopefully that helps. Lastly, if you have 3 or more authors, don't forget that you only list the first author's name and then the et al. Phrase, which is et space al period. This allows you to not take up too much space listing out a bunch of author names. You write the et al. Phrase the exact same whether you're writing the name into the sentence or in the parentheses. Hopefully this helps you sort out how to list author information. This concludes our third video on APA in-text citations. We did not cover everything there is to know about this topic, such as how to handle companies or organizations as authors, what if there isn't a date of publication listed for my source, and how do you find location information if it doesn't have page numbers. If you run into further questions, please contact us through the information on the slide or by using our Make an Appointment form on our website. Make sure to check out our last video in the series where we'll go over APA's requirements for the references page and discuss some of the most common source types and how to cite them. Thanks for watching and have a great day.